Tim is going to give us a variation on one of his favorite metaphors of killing two birds with one stone, but in typical Tim style, he's going to do it through another very vivid metaphor with similar ideas, roasting, a similar principle, roasting two pieces of meat on one fire. So, and Tim will be using his Polish knowledge, one of his many languages. So over to you, Tim.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Derek. So now you know why I call this roasting two pieces of meat on one fire. It's about killing two birds with one stone. I mean, the whole message that I'm trying to make in all the talks is that science is good for languages, language is good for science. You can do two things well at the same time in the context of a scientific career. And I'm going to use as an example of one language, one of my favorite languages, which is Polish. So how you can polish your Polish through research and make your research richer through Polish. Something that I've repeated many times today is English is a strange language. And this is a very good example of it. The same spelling, but different pronunciations. How strange is that? Yeah. So now, why the Poles actually have a very unique way of expressing the concept of killing two birds with one stone. Their expression is upiec dwie pieczenie na jednym ogniu, which is to roast two pieces of meat on one fire. Now, that actually is much less violent than the other variations. In countries here in red, you do something with birds. So like kill two birds with one stone, prendere due piccioni con una fava, to take two pigeons with a fava bean, or matare dos pájaros con un tiro, kill two birds with one shot. If you're in the green area, then you kill two rabbits or two hares, like in the Russian, ubit z dwóch zajców z одним выстрелом. If you're in Central Europe or Nordic countries, you do things with flies. So also fliegen in eine Klapp schlagen. The French, they strike as of two things, but they don't define what. So they say, faire d'une pierre deux coups, if I'm not mistaken. So we don't know what they're striking. But why am I mentioning sort of idiomatic expressions? Well, why they're worth learning, it's worth learning for the same reason that we learn languages. Firstly, you can appreciate the differences between other languages and your own language. So, wer nichts von anderen Sprachen weiß, kennt seine eigene nicht. Also, as we've heard today from Goethe, to understand other languages, you want to know your own. And the second was actually to connect with others. So by learning these idiomatic expressions, just like with learning languages, you show interest in their culture, you connect with them. Now, connect is a word I will use often, but, as the Czechs say, opakovanie matka moudrosti, or повторение это мать учения in Russian, which is like repetition is the mother, of wisdom. Okay, so I've shown you this. So people think languages and science are separate. I believe in doing both of them. And why are languages good for a scientific career? You can collaborate better with people. If you can collaborate better, you have more people want to work together with you, more people want to visit you, you have more output. So it's good for science, but more is your, half our life at least is work. So why not enjoy half your life by connecting people and enjoying working together with them? And also, people say, oh, how do I learn languages? How am I going to find time with them? Well, basically you do the same thing that scientists use to learn English, which is by making languages part of your work. Non-Anglophone scientists will have English made part of their work automatically by them for the profession. But so you just need to make some effort yourself to organize your life so that you are learning the language by doing your work. And the scientific world is actually made for language learners. There's so many people from so many different countries doing it, But ironically, although we're very international, we're told to collaborate with people from other countries. We're encouraged to be mobile, but the role of language in that is hardly ever discussed. Actually, at no university that I've worked in have people said, oh, to work together with other people, let's learn their languages. And you hear, assumptions such as science is independent of language. I'll talk about that in a minute. And also maybe the mistake, might be that, was it John Wharton, is that his name? McWhorter was making, he was trying to say it doesn't matter what language you use, people are only interested in the information and not how it's transmitted. John McWhorton, you are wrong, in my opinion. It's very important how something is transmitted. A lot of the message is how you say it, not what you say. So, and again, as I mentioned, many scientists are multilingual, but to use the Dutch expression, saying to frame the eend in the bait, the strange duck in the hole in the ice. But we're all in different, holes in the ice. So we're actually a whole flock of strange ducks. And the point of having these events is to connect all the ducks, into a flock. Yeah. And we're also very privileged as scientists because we come into contact with people from so many different places that we actually can be, the bridges between cultures. If you think about how international our Faculty of Science and Technology is here at Lancaster, much more so than the others. So that's an also advantage. So what am I going to talk about? Very briefly, what I do as a researcher, and then why do I learn languages if everybody speaks English? Science and languages are intertwined, and I want to show why Polish is sometimes a much better language to know than English, because you can connect with people. And then I'll give you an example of how you can learn languages as a scientist, especially Polish. This is not a scientific study. This is just more like a personal story, like a case study, which I hope you find helpful. Okay, so what I do, I'm a biomaterial scientist, so I make actually composite materials. One of the things I do is I make hydrogels and I mineralize these, and that with the intention of them being implanted into bone tissue defects in order to stimulate the regeneration. And the point I want to make is that this is a multidisciplinary collaboration involving material scientists, of which I am one, and biologists, doctors. But to do research effectively, you need to do it in a team, and teamwork is based on relationships, and relationships are based on communication, mutual understanding, and rapport, making a connection with people. And here's where languages can play a role. And science, as I said, is very international. Now, I'm paraphrasing one of Francesca's colleagues here. What role might science play in engineering? Surely tensile strength is the same in English as in Polish. We saw the quote earlier today. Mathematics is independent of language. I don't believe that. What tensile strength is, if you don't know, it's basically tensile strength when you stretch a material. It's how much force is withstood per unit of surface area. Okay, so once you have a force that's high enough for a specific surface area, the material will fail. Now, in Polish, the expression is wytrzymałość na rozciąganie, which roughly translated as withstandingness or robustness on pulling apart. Now, you see it's the same concept, but it's expressed in a different way, okay? But what's more important than that is that the people who will say ultimate tensile strength and the people who say wytrzymałość na rozciąganie, they are very different. They come from different cultures, different scientific cultures where different things may be valued and emphasized, okay? And science and engineering, it's all based on collaboration between humans. So my assertion is everything that's good for human interactions, including languages, is going to be good for science. Okay, so what's the point if everybody speaks English? Well, I'll quote a man who speaks 20 languages. Why learn a language when everyone speaks English? Well, there are millions of people who don't speak English, and even if they do, their hearts and minds are in their own languages. And that's why, yes, language is transmitting information, but that's only one function. It's about it also has an interpersonal function, building the relationship with them. And again, not everybody speaks English. Our wonderful map maker who made the map of killing two birds with one stone. This is a map of what percentage of the population of a European country can have a conversation in English. Okay, it's self-assessed. Green means a very high percentage, so here over 95%, Sweden 86%. But red means fewer, and in Poland, only about 1/3 of the population would say we can have a conversation, in English, and then about at what level we don't know. And the other question is, does this 34% always want to have a conversation in English? Okay, so we had this quote earlier today by Nelson Mandela. He understood the emotional power of language. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. So I call English the second-class passport to the world. You will reach a lot of heads with English, but it's much more difficult to reach people's hearts with English. That's where other languages like Polish, for instance, can play a much better role. Now, not everybody will want to speak English all the time. So Luis Pinot, who came to dinner with us yesterday, said there's a lot of business in science, and that's very true. And to quote Willy Brandt, who was the Chancellor of West Germany, if I am selling to you, I speak your language, but if I am buying, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen. So you have to speak German. So no, not everybody is going to want to speak English to you whenever you want to, okay? And my favorite, I think the most important one, is by Kato Lomb. She was an interpreter at the United Nations, one of the first. She could do it in 10 languages without any preparation. And she said, "Anielf as etlen amit rossel is erdemesh tudni," which is, language is the only thing worth knowing, even poorly. And she was right, because once you've seen the smile, as my friend Kenny says, on someone's face because you study, speak, understand their language, there's no way back. Okay. Now, is that true? Well, English, and this is where I think the weakness of English is that because it's like McDonald's, because of its popularity, there's nothing so exotic about it. There's nothing so special about it. So, okay, speak English. If you speak English, that's like saying I ate at McDonald's. Yeah, okay, I'm not surprised. You may speak English very well, and then I can appreciate the effort that you've made to reach such a high level. But still, I'm impressed, but I'm not touched. But some people who show that they are genuinely interested in Anglophone culture, who are genuinely interested in the language, they do succeed in touching me. But I think that these people here, they actually are, I think, the minority of the people who speak English. Now, for Polish, and I think most other languages, the situation is reversed. Yes, you can, very much so. Now, to use the model of Thomas Bonk here, the 3 classes of language, as he said, there are those languages that that knowledge is expected. You're the first one. The second one where knowledge is appreciated, and the third one where they don't expect it at all, and you can make a big impression. Now, I don't know if Thomas would agree with this categorization completely, but I've done it for languages, in European languages that I have some knowledge of. So English is definitely in the expected sort of category. Depending where you are in Europe, it may be sort of French or Spanish or Russian, somewhere between the two. In the second group, where people appreciate your knowledge, but they're pleasantly surprised, but not amazed if you speak it. And there I would put most of the Western European languages like Portuguese, Italian, Dutch, and German. But then there are also the third category. These are minority languages, and and Polish is very much in this third category. Now, according to this model, English is the best and the worst language. The first class of language, especially English, is better for impersonal information transmission. So I am speaking English to all of you and to people online, and because English is very popular, people will understand my message, okay? But I'm transmitting information with you. I'm not engaging with you by speaking here, really. However, I plead for I'm a big fan of the third category. So if you want to connect with people, you want actually to speak the languages that they don't expect you to speak, including Polish, because, it's a real sign of interest, in them. And so this is why English is the worst, because it's not evidence in itself of an interest in a particular culture. Okay. So, as I said, sometimes it's said that English is the language of science. No, it's one of many languages in science. Now, science is often presented in English, so it's good in circumstances such as this to transmit information. But if you are wanting to discuss it, then usually if you engage people, in their language, so this is me at my favorite conference in the Polish mountains near Nowy Sącz, they will generally be more open for you, and if you engage them, in their language. Okay. And also, you may have the impression, if you looked at scientific literature, that it's all in English. Now, not all scientific literature is in English, but the fact that it's published in English does not mean that it was done in English. So here, this is one of my publications, and it was not done in English. It was done in German, Dutch, Czech, Polish, and Russian, but that's not obvious by reading the title, okay? Okay. So I've talked about, why it's worth learning languages apart from English, or I shouldn't say apart from, I should say as well as English. Now, how might you learn? So I don't like giving people advice on language learning in general. I try to say, try to find out what works for you. So the only advice I give is advice that I stole from this gentleman here, which is the best method to learn a language is the method you'll stick with. If you can make language learning a habit and something that you enjoy doing, there you go. So note the keywords: best method, stick with, habit, and enjoy. Okay, now, because we're academics in science and engineering, I hope that means that we like science and engineering. And as a habit, we will communicate about them. And it's very easy to stick with your work. So my assertion is the work is the best method for learning languages, okay? And that's how scientists who are not Anglophones become so good at English, because they are automatically, consistently exposed to English in their job. They go to conferences where they hear presentations in English or see posters in English. If they collaborate with people from other countries, they may do it in English, or they may have visitors who they chat to in English. Scientific literature is largely in English. So it's as if the language has been integrated for them into their everyday life, so they automatically practice consistently. Okay. Now, why not just do the same thing with another language? So now the particular language, Polish. Well, I love talking about Polish. The story actually starts in Russia, in Moscow, at the Государственный институт русского языка имени Pushkina. And I was there, studying Russian after I graduated from university. Now, there were lots of Polish students there who were studying Russian, and I loved talking to them because it was so much easier to understand their Russian than that of the people in Moscow. They spoke, very often much more fluently than we students from the West, because Russian is so much easier for them to learn. And it's the interest in people that actually started the interest in the language in Polish. So, and the next step was actually in Germany. When I finished at Imperial College, I went to study at the Technische Universität München in southern Germany. And there I found that the Polish language courses were not particularly useful for me, because they were, of course, aimed at mainly Germans. If you speak another Slavic language like Russian, then you will learn Polish more quickly. Now, the group courses in Polish is not the most popular language. Now, it does has a disadvantage and an advantage. The disadvantage first. So I found that the courses are generally at a lower level, and the speed is too slow. So what I needed was to actually learn independently and sort of tailor it to my own needs. Now, I think as well, there's this idea that language learning has to take place predominantly in the framework of a classroom, which is not true. I suspect that this is one reason why certain languages are considered difficult, because the less commonly learned languages, the less likely group courses are going to be offered. And then some people still think that in order to learn a language, you need to do it in a group context. Okay. Now, but there are advantages as well. And I had a stroke of luck to actually go to a course with an excellent teacher who now runs her own language academy in Wrocław in Poland. Now, because there are fewer students, the classes are generally smaller, okay? And so the teacher has more time for you. And I saw when I was a student at Technische Universität München, polskie kursy konwersacyjne, a conversation course. So I went, and I was the only person who came. Well, my teacher was very nice. She said, well, even if you are the only person who's coming to the course, it's going to happen. I promised it would happen, so it will. And so, because I was the only one there, I basically sort of chatted to her sort of every time. It was less like having a, just an individual tuition every week. And, we could do whatever I wanted to do or whatever I wanted to talk about. Okay, so it's not always bad. Now, another excellent place to learn Polish is Northern Ireland, okay? Why? Now, a topic that has come up often is, oh yes, the United Kingdom, it's just so monolingual, you can't practice any other languages. They only speak English here. Well, thank God that's not true. In Lancaster, I've met people who can speak all these different languages. I haven't seen Cockney yet, but apart from that, I've met people who speak Bulgarian, Polish, Lithuanian, etc. So there's a huge linguistic diversity here, And this is one of my sort of polyglot hero, as it were. He's a man called Moses McCormick, who goes under the name of Lao Shu 55,000. He learned languages mainly by talking to immigrants, and he lived in Columbus, Ohio. And this is a list of the languages that he wanted to learn over 10 years. There are about 90 here. But if you look at his videos, you will actually see him speaking, actually most of these on YouTube, okay? And what's actually nice about him is the reaction of the people that he films when, so for instance, if this guy, Moses McCormick spoke him to in Hindi, and actually watch this one in particular, because this guy starts almost jumping up and down in happiness. And one with Polish, this woman says at this Polish kitchen in Columbus, I'm in shock. And so really, learn the languages in Tomasz's third class, and then you will have a bigger impact on the people, okay? Now, when I was little in Northern Ireland, there were very few immigrants. But when Poland entered the EU, lots of waves of Poles came to the UK, even to Northern Ireland. So this was actually probably the first wave of immigration that Northern Ireland has had. And so when I visited my parents in Northern Ireland, it was almost impossible not to meet Poles. Okay, so whenever I went to this is where I live here, or if I was in Belfast, I would automatically meet Poles in the course of so anyway, of course, I would sort of try to speak Polish to them. I remember one occasion where I asked for one cookie. When I responded in Polish, she gave me 10 because she was just pleased that somebody was speaking Polish to me, okay? So now, from a scientific point of view, this was a turning point in my career when I went to my favorite conference, which is the Polish Society of Biomaterials, which takes place near Slovakia near a town called Nowy Sącz. And it's been an excellent conference for making contacts with people. That's one of the main reasons to go to conferences. You meet people, make contacts. And, conferences are a language learner's, a scientist's dream, but also a language learner's dream. It's so easy to start a conversation because you have, presentations and poster presentations. So it's like a double all-you-can-eat buffet of science, but also, of language at the same time. So if it's a national conference like this, you can practice one language all the time. If it's an international conference, you can speak lots of them. And these are just some of my collaborators in Poland. You start, collaborating with somebody, and then you use the language more. And if you use the language more, then you can collaborate with more people, you make more contacts, and then it's a sort of a positive feedback loop. So more language loose, more collaboration. And actually by collaborating with all these people, that's how you become, good at the language. Just like scientists become good at learning English. So it just requires a bit more organization of your career. Okay, and then, we've organized at Lancaster conferences together with Poles as well, so you practice automatically then. And one problem in science is how do you measure the value of languages? It's not easy. But just using myself as a guinea pig here, I have 108 publications in my career, but actually almost 50 of these have actually been with Polish co-authors. I also speak Russian and Czech, and then thanks to that, I have some joint papers with them as well. And also, if you can speak somebody's language, they're more likely to want to come and visit you. So I've had about 30 visitors from Poland in my sort of group under my supervision, which then translates into the publications. Okay, so how do you do this? How exactly do you integrate the language? Right, well, this is a mail that I sent in Polish. Now, I needed 10 minutes to write this. Now, in English, I would have taken about 5 minutes. But because I invested those 5 extra minutes to write in Polish, I had 10 minutes of Polish practice by doing so. Yeah. We were talking about that article as well, that speakers of English as an additional language, they have to invest a lot of time in order to read publications, in order to write. So think about, how much time you can save them by writing to them in their language, and if they can write back to you in their language, how much time you're saving for them as well. Yeah, and this was an excellent textbook for learning Polish, much better than because it actually had the information that I wanted to see. So it's called Engineering of Biomaterials, Inżynieria Biomateriałów, and here you can see a Polish version, and then there's an English version. So by reading this, you can actually obtain the Polish specific scientific vocabulary that you can use to talk about with Poles, and you get scientific information. And if you read the Polish version, sometimes you notice extra things, extra information that are missing in the English version as well. So basically it's sort of tailoring your material to suit your needs. Yeah. And one of the nicest things is if you collaborate with people, you can do things that are good for you, but also help people. So this is one of my collaborators from Lublin. The first time she went abroad, she came to Lancaster. People are more willing to come and visit, if they speak their language. They often say that I encourage them to speak English here, but then sometimes they say to me, can we speak Polish instead? I don't feel like speaking English. And they find that reassuring. And so if they visit, more results for you, and also it's good for their development. I mean, this lady here, after she came to Lancaster, then she started visiting lots of other labs as well. So it was also good for her, career development. She survived me, so she thought I can survive, stays in other labs as well. Okay, so how progress that I've made. This was my first Polish lesson in Wrocław Główny in Poland. I got it from a beggar, and what he said, I remember I only knew 3 phrases in Polish at that time, which is "Czy pan mówi po angielsku? Czy pan mówi po niemiecku? And czy pan mówi po rosyjsku?" Which is, do you speak English? Do you speak German? Do you speak Russian? And then, so I said, a beggar came up to me and said something. I said, "Do you speak English?" "Yeah." "Do you speak German?" "Yeah." "Do you speak Russian?" And then, "Cholera, nie rozumiesz," which means, oh, damn, you don't understand. So that's the first phrase I learned in Polish. It's like, damn, you don't understand. But since then, I've made more progress, and I'm now able to give lectures in Polish and records of YouTube videos as well. So to finish off, you might say, well, couldn't you have done all that in English? And yeah, theoretically, yes, but it wouldn't have been so much fun. Well, isn't English enough? Well, it can be enough in certain circumstances, but enough or good is the enemy of better. You can have, you can sometimes get more out of your relationships if you actually speak their language. And it's funny that scientists are very aware of the limitations of scientific techniques, but people don't often talk about the limitations, of language there. And also, science is more than academia. The academic world has a tendency to focus on things it values itself, like grants and so on. But part of science should be also teaching people, and English isn't necessarily the best language for teaching, or public engagement. You were saying you need to have a two-way sort of exchange of knowledge and ideas. Is that best done in English in all situations? I don't think so. Okay, and again, I've mentioned this before, the scientific world is very international, and we're encouraged to work together with other people and be mobile, but these languages aren't discussed and promoted. As I said, I think one problem is the difficulty of measuring in a quantitative way, but also there's no sort of tradition actually of encouraging language learning in science. There's no nurturing environment, as Israel put it. you have a tune, but there's no harmony with it. So one thing I'd really like to do is to create, such an environment for us. So sum up again, roast 2 pieces of meat on one fire. Languages are good for sciences. Science is good for language learning. You don't have to speak well to make a connection with people, and do what scientists do in English to learn English, and then you will learn their language as well. Okay, and let's make a good environment for languages. So, any questions, please, feel free to write to me. Oh, Thank you very much indeed.